Okay, well, good morning. Wow. Good morning, everyone. That wakes everyone up. What I'd like to do today is just go over a few things with you. When we were trying to get the agenda sorted out here for today, what we thought would be good would be just to hit the highlight on some of the product changes that are coming along with respect to the fungicides. There's a few warning flags there you need to be aware of. And then really focus on the CWBIRDI project, which focuses on the remote sensing and then in its applications in the wild blueberry sector. And then to finish things up, given some of the challenges we had with leaf diseases and especially rust, what I'd like to do is just pass this along to Alex Cornell just to finish the presentation off. And Alex is a graduate student on campus working on the sprout year leaf diseases. Okay, so we've had quite an active team, and it's been quite a challenge working our way through COVID, especially with municipality restrictions last year. Really couldn't get out too far out of Colchester County, but we were able to get quite a bit of research done last year. So we had Ben Lyons doing a little bit of work on the equipment, Joel Lyons working on the remote sensing, and Joel's also going to be presenting here later this morning. And then some of the graduate students, and as mentioned, Alex is going to be giving his presentation later on. So to focus on some of the things I just wanted to make sure you're aware of on the disease management side of things for this upcoming year is, if you haven't already yet been aware, chlorothalonil and its use in wild blueberries is being phased out. And this is being implemented by PMRA, which is part of Health Canada. And so what the rationale associated with it is there's both health aspects, particular it is potential carcinogen, and then also environment. Okay, so it's a product that worked incredibly well. I still have stains on the pickup trucks from it. It definitely persists, but its time's done. And as a result of that, we really need to have a look at some alternative products with respect to its use. Now, the other thing I'd like just to mention is one of the fungicides that's gone through the screening program and continues to be a really good product, and especially for blueberry rust, when you combine it with a triazole such as Proline, is the Approvia. We ran into a blip with it a couple of years ago. And the background on this is when the product went through registration, there was always what they call variants associated with it. So more or less two recipes. The one on your left, the straw-colored one, is the one that had more experience with in the research trials. Fantastic product, no issues with it. Great. One on the right, the one that has a little bit more of a soy sauce look to it, is so it's darker, is the one that's problematic. And when you look at what we were seeing, it's just clone specific, which made it really bizarre. So it was causing some chlorosis on the leaf tissue of the clones, and depending on how serious, it could start off as a leaf reddening, and in some serious cases, we had complete foliation of the clone. So I've received assurances from Syngenta that the lighter colored variant is the one that's going to be used this year on a go-forward basis. And when combined with a triazole, in particular with Proline, it still is given the best control of the leaf disease portfolio that we have in the sprout year. So that's the update I wanted to mention with it. Other thing I just mentioned is quick update. So Pristine, it's been a fantastic product for us when used in the crop year, and it was some cases it's been used as botryticide. It's never really been a great botrytis product, but on the leaf disease side, so when applied towards the end of bloom and into fruit set, it really helped keep the leaf diseases down, helped keep the canopy healthy. There's also some other attributes with it. It served as a ethylene inhibitor, so it helped keeps the berry on the stem, so you don't have too much pre-harvest fruit shatter. Problem with it is with its ongoing use, there's a lot of selection pressures. So it's a fungicide that, from my perspective, has seen better days. It's been for the most part replaced over the past year with a new BASF product, Maravon. And when you look at the active ingredients, what they did is the boscode component's out. BASF have brought in the fluxaperoxide, which is it's also in the fungicide Circadus. If you've heard me talk about it, it's the sole product associated with it. And overall, it's a better product. It's far more efficacious on controlling the disease pressures that'll be present in the cropping year. So best way to look at it is I'd really consider replacing the Pristine with it if you're still using the Pristine. Just from the perspective that Pristine it's been a great product, but it's had its better days as far as those things is concerned. Okay, so one last thing I'll mention, and the combination of the Provi and Proline, that's out of place. That shouldn't be there. That should have been back on the sprout year. Is the Maravon and the Serafil. And so we've continued to be doing screening work on products for adequate monolinear control, and then also for botrytis. And one of the challenges that we're seeing, and we're seeing this consistently when we're having a look at the efficacy data, is the botryticides that we have left. So whether it be Switch, the Lunar Tranquility, and those are the two major ones, and then also others are getting. That's also seeing the scenario, not seeing the same level of control. They're a little bit more erratic. So when you combine this with looking at some of the work in the lab, where we've looked at the responses of the fungicides look at the response of the botrytis cultures to the fungicides, unfortunately, there is also some selection pressures. So early stages of resistance occurring. So with that, what appears to be giving us good control in some of the more problematic fields where you have botrytis, so if you're along Fund-de-Shore or in Dorchester area where botrytis pressures can get high, product that seems to be doing well for us is a combination of the Maravon and the Serafil. And the Serafil it's a biofungicide, so it's a bacillus organism. And what we're finding with it is it just gives you that little bit more consistent botrytis control than to use our traditional chemistries. So if you have a really, really heavy field with botrytis pressures, it's a good product to have a look at. It's one that's been performing really well for us in the past little bit. So the Serafil, as I mentioned, it's a BASF product. It's been around for a year or two now with respect to its use in wild blueberries. And so the label is present on your right there. And as I mentioned, it just gives a little bit more consistent control, especially towards the end of bloom with respect to providing good botrytis control. And the slide on your left of the wild blueberries gives you a good indication that, especially when you have a little, smattering of frost, and then you have the botrytis come in and chew up the plant a little bit, it does a little bit better job. And left unchecked, that's what we saw on the far left picture, the blueberries. On the right, it tends to keep the canopy a little bit healthier. So it's an interesting product to look from that perspective, and it's a biofungicide, which has some bonuses associated with it. Now, the reason why you see a lot of red in this slide is you shouldn't be using these products. They're not yet registered for wild blueberries. They're great products, they're coming along nicely. And just to go over them, the Sevia is a new triazole. It's also BASF chemistry, and so it's metrofluconazole. And it has its uses. It's not as broad spectrum as Proline, but it's the best new triazole that we've seen come along in, well, easily over 10 plus years. So it's one that we're hoping is going to be in play next year, but you can't use it this year. Okay? Another one is Miravis Dual. And this uses, it's a similar scenario to what I mentioned with the Pristine, where with the Miravis Duo, it's a leaf disease control product and getting mixed up with the other Miravis product. So it's not yet registered. So it'll be interesting to see how this does in the leaf disease trial. Another one, which is generic, same active ingredient as Proline, as Sortel. It might be able to get it commercially, but it's not yet registered on wild blueberries. So just be cautious when you're proceeding along this path with these products. So give you a bit of rationale on how these products are screened. So we'll start off exploratory works, smaller trials, ideal environments. We step this up to larger strip plot trials. We try to get these out. And we had to get these out when you're looking at the sprout year leaf diseases because of what we ran into with problems with the Provia a couple of years ago. And the new chemistry, the Sevia, is a photograph of it up in Earltown. Did a really, really nice job on controlling with what we were calling septoria, and then also with the blueberry rust. So it has its place, but you can't use it yet until we get the registration for it. And another one, and this is the Miravis product I wanted to talk about. You'll see it's in yellow, kind of a yellowish orange, and this is Miravis Prime. And this consists of some new product, flumentophen, fludeoxonil. It has one of the active ingredients in switch, so fludeoxonil, and new chemistry product. It's a really, really good product. It's been registered, is available for use in wild blueberries, challenges, MRLs. Okay, you need to check with your end users on it if this is going to be an acceptable product or not. It's fairly new chemistry, and as a result of this, the MRL in some of the export markets might not be yet there. So with that, what I'd like to do now is go into the remote sensing work that we've got underway over the past few years. Things took a nice leap forward this year with some of the field work that we had underway. And what I'll do is I'll do the first part of this, and then I'll pass it over to Joel, who's done the bulk of the remote sensing work. So the overall goals with this project were to develop cost-effective, efficient means of accurately sensing what's going on in the blueberries, and then along with that, developing the prescription maps. Then that can be, initially we base this on blueberry coverage, and then along with this, then develop a prescription map that can be plugged into a sprayer, and preferably a sprayer that has individual nozzle control. And so with the goal of not applying these fungicides initially to bare ground. Okay, that was what the benchmark was when we started this project. And then as times have moved along, we're also looking now into, as the technologies are really moving along quite quickly, the three-dimensional mapping of wild blueberry fields. So we've got some technologies that'll allow that to occur as well. And you'll see some of the implications here today. So the objectives, as I mentioned before, are to assess the coverage and then also the population structure of wild blueberry fields, come up with some nice orthomosaic maps is the long term or the terminology that's used that can then be used in the prescription map, and Joel will talk about those later on. And then use these technologies, get a good idea of what's going on within the blueberry as far as the canopy coverage is concerned, its nutrient status, and you'll get a good indication of this in a few minutes, and then also on yield. And then through the use of the prescription maps and use of them in the self-propelled sprayers, and then also a retrofitted boom sprayer, seeing if we can't get a little bit more efficient use of the pest control products. And then along with this, look then at the impact on the cost of production. So hopefully there's going to be some significant cost savings. We think we can cut back on agrochemical use. If I had to come up with a number, at least 20%. And then also look at its impact on life cycle analysis. And so what the life cycle analysis does is it looks at, okay, what's the impact of these altered production practices on the carbon footprint. So going back to what Peter mentioned from a climate change perspective, what's actually being released into the environment as a result of these technologies. And hopefully there's some improvements. And then the same thing, what's the energy consumption as well. Okay, so with that, I'll pass it over to Joel then to go over the status of the equipment.
All right, so remote sensing is a really important part of the program. So we're just going to talk a little bit about our UAV and remote sensing equipment. So for the past few seasons, we've been using the DJI Matrice 600 Pro. It's a pretty heavy and stable UAV. We have a 16 megapixel camera and a multispectral sensor pictured here. The multispec captures visual red edge and near infrared data. So this is really useful for looking at plant health. So this system uses GPS positioning. Now, at the end of the last season, we acquired a DJI Matrice 300 RTK. This is a substantial upgrade on the previous platform. This platform is much more compact, it has a longer battery life, and it's fairly resistant to rain and wind, which really opens up our data collection capacity. Importantly, the system is also equipped with real-time kinematics. So this is a system that greatly increases the accuracy of our data, and it also reduces the need to collect time-consuming ground control points. So one of the major upgrades that the system represents is the acquisition of a LiDAR sensor. For those not familiar with LiDAR, LiDAR stands for light detection and ranging. It's a type of sensor that creates point clouds by sending out lasers and then recording their times to judge distance. So this results in three-dimensional field maps in the form of point clouds. This LiDAR also has a built-in RGB camera that allows us to colorize our point clouds for additional data points. And could someone play the video? There's just a little video embedded here. So this is a demonstration from late in the 2021 season, after not long after we acquired the system. So this shows a point cloud being recorded in real time, side by side with footage of the RGB camera, just to kind of give you a perspective on how that works. And here are a few samples of fields that we collected late last season. You can see this is after these are both fields that are mowed down. Now, how is LiDAR useful in the context of wild blueberries? So our plan is to use LiDAR to see if we can spatially determine canopy height in the fields. So we're planning to do this by flying the fields early in the season, in the spring, and then again later in the summer, and see if we can determine the height by comparing the values that we get from both measurements. Additionally, we'd like to see if we can determine the fruit zone by use of UAV and potentially apply this to the harvesting process as a cost saver. Finally, canopy height itself gives several data points that can be useful in mapping factors like plant nutrient status. So population structure, one of our goals is to start determining this in terms of phenotypes and species. So this is an area that Kenneth Anku, who's one of our doctoral candidates, has been working on. He's been using machine learning classifications and radiometric data to differentiate species and phenotypes in the field. So far, he's been pretty successful at isolating the nigrum phenotype, as shown in gray in the below image. And we believe there's potential for further development in this area. So field coverage is another one of our objectives, and it's a workflow that we've been refining for a little while now. And the basic idea is to use machine learning to classify segmented objects in a field based on their spectral characteristics, so how they appear to our sensors. So we're separating out canopy from non-canopy objects, whether those are weeds or bare earth. Typically, the results are the most accurate when used in conjunction with some level of ground truthing, so essentially using a GPS before the flight and marking different ground covers so that we can come back to them later. NDVI and other vegetation indices, which are derived from the multispectral camera, are also incorporated. We'll talk about those a little more in a moment. We found there are also some seasonal variations in spectral response. Typically, weeds and canopy are easier to differentiate in the fall or spring when the blueberry plants are dormant, whereas in the summer it's difficult to distinguish green objects from green objects, essentially. So the use for these maps will be prescription mapping for agrochemical products that are focused on the canopy, such as fungicides. So these canopy maps are expected to last about 4 cycles before you would need to fly them again. So with the high cost of herbicide application, weed detection in fields is another area that has a serious potential for agrochemical savings, especially combined with prescription mapping. So far, we've been able to accurately differentiate fescue from canopy and other weeds. And we also have some progress on mapping other fields, such as, or mapping other weeds, such as sorrel and moss. So the two images here, the first is a true color composite of a field in Upper Stewiacke that we flew in the fall last year. And on the bottom, we have a classification that would be used to generate a prescription map of weed coverage so that we're only targeting weeds and not canopy. So in terms of prescription mapping itself, this is something we've been working on for a little while, and you may have heard about it in our other meetings. So we've generated dozens of maps, and we've successfully tested them in the John Deere self-propelled sprayers. These maps are basically, we generate them by rasterizing the classification and then converting them back to a format that a sprayer can read. So right now we generate them in a grid that's based on 1 meter cell sizes. And then we can sieve out any objects that we find the sprayer can't handle. So things around 3 square meters are typically sieved out. So the map here is an example of a prescription map targeting fescue specifically, where the pink areas denote weed coverage and the orange areas are canopy. So in this field with really high weed coverage, the savings would be expected to be at about 40%. So this season, we're going to be performing further tests in this area to determine how much agrochemical savings we're really getting and start refining the process a little further. So vegetation indices, as I brought up earlier, are an excellent indicator of plant health, as seen in the leaf disease trial pictured here. So the left image shows an NDVI map created using near-infrared data from our MicaSense multispectral sensor. The green areas represent healthy canopy, and red areas are defoliated or unhealthy. So the leaf disease trial that you can see in the center here is clearly visible, as it's a bit defoliated or unhealthy. So something that we noticed in 2021 while using vegetation indices was this field where healthy canopy exists in strips on the edges of the field. So you can see the green near the roads at the bottom of the map there. So we believe that what may have happened here is that the tractor picked up in speed as it approached the middle of the field when applying fertilizer, and therefore the amount of fertilizer was reduced in those areas. So we started thinking about ways that this could be mitigated, and one potential solution that has several other potential cost-saving benefits would be to apply our prescription mapping process that we just talked about and use it with liquid fertilizers. So we could apply them to fields at variable rates. Our proposed product is pictured here, where 3 rates and no spray areas can be used. So less healthy canopy can be given more fertilizer and vice versa. And additionally, bare patches or sufficiently healthy canopy could be skipped over, which would further save on fertilizer costs. So we'll be testing liquid fertilizers and this workflow this season to see the viability of this solution. And finally, we will also be conducting some field trials this season to see if we're able to estimate yield. So the research shows that bloom tends to show a pretty high response in the near infrared band. So we'll be using our MicaSense multi-spec camera on the drone again to analyze the canopy. And the other area of interest is the potential ability we previously mentioned of LiDAR to possibly map fruit zone and help us to determine yield in that way. And I'll hand that back over to Dave.
Okay, so one last thing I'll just mention, and how are we doing for time, Peter? 10 minutes. 10 minutes, yeah, we'll be fine. Equipment-wise, so we ran into a bit of a glitch last year, like others did, with respect to equipment availability. And the problem was, first, we couldn't get the Raven system in. There's parts problems, and so we hoped to have it in February. I think we got end of July. And then there's some problems with some of the parts that have been provided. So one of the valves was leaking oil. So we finally got the system just about operational in November. So we're hoping to get it up and going this year. Now in the interim, what could we do? And so we said, okay, well, we have self-propelled sprayers that are accessible. So Bragg Lumber Company let us put some of the prescription maps into their equipment. And so along with developing the prescription maps, we had to figure out, okay, what's the limits of the computer in that sprayer? So it was a good process to go through. I think we found out what the capabilities are of the sprayer system. Joel mentioned them earlier, and it really has some nice implications with it. One of the features when you actually look at their ExactApply system is there's a suite of 6 nozzles that can be situated. Best way to describe it is you can have, at a given time, a nozzle A, a nozzle B, and if you configure the system properly, you can have A and B applying product at the same time. And so this is where the liquid fertilizer work is going to come in quite nicely. So areas that don't have any blueberry canopy, so it's bare ground, won't get any fertilizer. Those that are really thin, so short stems that are a little bit thin on the density side, we can make adjustments for those, get on more fertilizer. Those that are too tall, we'll just pull it back a little bit. So it's going to be a really interesting trial and see how it works itself out. One thing I'll mention with the liquid fertilizers, they are being used in other sectors, but you are looking at about I would say between a 40% plus markup on the product compared to the granular fertilizers. So there are some limitations associated with it, but I think they still might have a pretty good future for us then as well. So this is the Raven system that was started to be worked on last summer, and I'd really like to thank Green Diamond for helping us out. We originally had plans for the Raven distributor in Canada to come and build the site up. That couldn't happen with the travel restrictions, so Green Diamond really stepped up and helped us pull this system together. So what it consists of, which is a little bit different, is a hydraulic pump, which drives it. And then the first culprit that was giving us issues was that part on the far right, so pulse modulating valve. So when we received it, it was leaking oil, needed to be replaced, and then so that was responsible for quite a delay. But these are the individual control nozzles that are present on the unit that have quite a potential to save cost savings once we get this sprayer operational. So we're hoping to get it out and going this spring. We're going to be a little bit short on time here, so I won't go through all the benefits that are listed there. That's fairly self-explanatory as far as the material is presented. And again, as we mentioned, there are some substantial cost savings that we can see just by focusing on applying, in particular, the fungicides to areas where just the blueberry canopy is found. And then as a result of this, when you look at the production system from a sustainability perspective, we think there's going to be improvements on a carbon footprint basis. So you won't have as much greenhouse gases being released. And the nice thing with the wild blueberry system is it's already one of the best systems when you look at its production sustainability anyway. Compared to strawberries, tree fruits, grapes, it's in a very, very good situation from a sustainability perspective. And one further thing that we wanted to get a better understanding of as the project works its way along is, okay, well, what's the relationship between the blueberry coverage in the field and what you can expect from a return on the investment? And as you'd expect, the patchier the field, so if you have a field that's only 70–80% covered in vine, it's one that the system is going to lend itself to far more than if you have 95% plus blueberry vine coverage. Okay, so that's what's actually associated with this. We have quite an array of activities that are hopefully going to proceed this year. Quite a few strip plot trials looking at the delivery of these prescription maps. We're hoping that we can tie it in with the fertilizer work that Joel mentioned earlier. Also look at assessing some of the new pest control products that are coming along. A very important part of this is we're hoping that it can be opened up so that we can get some of these trials underway in some of the other maritime provinces as well, and then integrate the results into some of the technology transfer activities that will also be then hopefully underway this upcoming year. So one thing that's come along is we are trying to get the information on the project, and then also other things such as presentations posted online as well. So with that, I'll pass this along then to Alex to give you an update on his leaf disease work.
5 minutes? That's perfect. This is just, yeah, so I'll be talking about the leaf disease management in the sprout year, so that first year of production. And just as a general overview of the diseases that we're looking at, I know I've talked about this before, and Dave's also mentioned before, but we have Valdensia leaf spot. Not typically that problematic, but it can occur in some localized areas as it has a pretty quick reproductive rate, and also can get attached to boots or equipment as it passes through the field and spread that way. Then we also have Spherulina leaf spot, which used to be called Septoria, but researchers at Agri-Food Canada re-identified it into a different genus. But it's the same, from a management perspective, it's the same, problems. And then we have blueberry leaf rust, which is definitely the most problematic. This past year, we saw heavy disease pressure from blueberry leaf rust, and it starts to come around in late July. And just is really persistent for the rest of the year. So the basis of my project is field trials looking at current fungicides and then also future fungicide options. And this is sort of as a replacement to Bravo or Chlorothalonil, which Dave mentioned earlier. So in my field trials this past year, in 2021, fungicides were applied on July 20th, and that was at the first sign of rust. So, scaring the field, we had our plot set up, ready to go, and then we started to see some rust, so that's when we applied our fungicide. And as an assessment, we did it 30 days after and 60 days after. We looked at the leaf number, the diseased leaves per stem, as a percentage. And then later in the year, we did floral bud number. And next year, we'll be doing yield because this is a sprout year. We also did NDVI, which Joel mentioned earlier. So how healthy is that canopy from the UAV or the drone's perspective looking down? So that's just a brief update on the chlorothalonil situation, which Dave already mentioned, the human health risks, and then also the environmental concerns. So here are some results from the 2021 field season. On the left there, we have the disease assessment. And so this is done on September 20th, which was about 60 days after the fungicide was applied. On the axis there, we have percent of the leaves that per stem that have disease. So we can see at this point in the year, leaf rust is definitely the more problematic and apparent disease. And spheruline leaf spot was still seen in some cases though. Some products that I want to mention, and Dave mentioned earlier, some new products that'll be available in the coming years is Sevia, which is you can see on the bottom left there. And then another one that will be available on the market in the coming years is that Miravis Duo in the middle there. And then this treatment called Full Pan on the right there is kind of an experimental thing that we're looking at. It's allowed by European Union importers, and it's also a multi-spectrum fungicide, like broad spectrum, which is also what Bravo was. So it could be a potential replacement, but just really early experimental stages with that. So we can see that the ProLine with the Provia definitely showing the best disease suppression. And that also translated to the graph on the right there, which is leaf number. So as the plant gets, more heavily infected, it tends to start to drop its leaves. And we want to maintain that canopy well into the fall as the plant continues to, build up carbohydrates as it prepares for the winter, and then starts to allocate those carbohydrates to the floral buds, which is important because it can partially determine next year's yield. Perfect. So from an overhead perspective, just in our 4x4 meter plots, the small plots, we can see that difference in defoliation, the untreated on the left, and then the ProLine with the Provia on the right. And then from using the UAV, this was done on October 5th, which I thought was a little bit late because you start to have some heavier frosts and the plants start to senesce a bit. So I could have done it a bit earlier, but I think it does do a great job of illustrating what it looks like and from above and how healthy that canopy is. So we can see the treatments that are underlined there. Treatment 9, that's the ProLine with the Provia. And that's the plot from, or the treatment plot and experimental plot from above. Those are 4x4 meter plots. And that's it.